The hot stove continues to get hotter across Major League Baseball with the trade deadline just a few days away, where the Philadelphia Phillies continue to get connected to several notable names, with Luis Robert Jr. climbing to the top of the list. Could this be the rabbit that Dave Dombrowski has in his hat, and is this a legitimate option that the team should be pursuing at the trade deadline? Doing a dive into exactly what each of those questions is, as well as what we know on the latest reporting. So to get right into it today, doing to start off with this report here coming that the Phillies are, quote, seriously considering and monitoring Luis Robert Jr. per, and a senior MLB writer here who I did check out his stuff, does look pretty legit here, and there has been some smoke surrounding this for quite some time. But also tonight we got reported from Ken Rosenthal that in his article he mentions the Phillies directly with Luis Robert Jr., saying, quote, Chicago White Sox center fielder Luis Robert Jr. was not in the lineup for the second time in 3 games on Friday night due to a tight groin, but the expectation he will be traded is riding. And he puts in parentheses, Philadelphia question mark, San Diego question mark. And I do think both places would be fun spots for Luis Robert Jr., but I do want to talk more about does Luis Robert Jr. make sense for the Phillies overall. Now, to dive into what he's producing on the season, it is not going to blow you away. And I have Eugenio Suarez up here, but to pull up Luis Robert Jr., 10 home runs, 41 RBIs, a 293 on-base percentage, 343 slugging percentage there. In his 286 at-bats, just 59 hits there, has struck out 95 times as well. He's a really difficult player that you kind of put an archetype on who exactly he is. This falls a little bit similar to the O'Neill Cruz conversation, where they're very theoretical baseball players, that you can squint and see it. That there was a point in time where Luis Robert Jr. was regarded as one of the top trade pieces in all of Major League Baseball. This was a guy that teams were salivating over getting the chance to add to their organization, and he essentially fell off a cliff here. Now, to give a little bit of respect to Luis Robert Jr., I understand it is the Chicago White Sox, and I do think there are guys that you put them in a change of scenery and their entire outlook and production does change drastically. And to be fair to him as well, he has been completely upfront and taken it on the chest in a way that I do respect. And what I mean by that exactly is I did want to pull up this quote here, this coming from back in May, and the article writes from MLB.com. Major League Baseball's trade deadline arrives in a little more than 2 months on July 31st, a date probably ingrained in the mind of White Sox center fielder Luis Robert Jr. The 27-year-old has been on high trade alert since early in the offseason and is a near certainty to be dealt by that date. But during a candid interview prior to Tuesday's contest against the Mariners at Wright Field, Robert admitted to not thinking about being traded. Here's the reason. The 5-tool talent, 2 years removed from turning in one of the most complete season performances in franchise history, is not playing up to his vast potential. Quote, right now, as my season is going, I don't think anybody is going to take a chance on me, said Robert through interpreter Billy Russo. I just focus on trying to get better. I can't think of anything else. And I do kind of respect him just putting it out on the table right here, because I will not forget that it was a little over a year ago at the trade deadline where me and Luke Arcani were talking pretty heavily of, is this a guy that makes sense for the Phillies? This is, you can see the vision, and he is still young, that at his age, still 27 years old, still got or set to turn 28 in just a couple days, but there's a lot of time that you can have, and this would not be, the all-in push for a short-term window. This could be a guy that sort of splits the difference, that he could be a part, if things play out correctly, where he is a piece of the core with Alec Boehm, with Bryson Stott, with the next upcoming class of pitching, with Christopher Sanchez, with Mick Abel, with Andrew Painter. You can go down the list if things go right, but this move has to be made about winning right now. And that is where the questions get a little bit difficult, because does Luis Robert Jr. actually help this baseball team win? That is a question that no one can fully know the answer to. If he plays to his peak, absolutely, he's the most complete outfielder on this team. But it has been more than a calendar year since we've seen that version of the White Sox outfielder. Now, I did want to pull up this article from Tim Kelly here on Pattison, who I think did a nice job putting it into context, and he writes up, Robert has been speculated upon as a trade candidate for the Phillies dating back to last summer, and he's a complicated player to evaluate. In 2023, Robert hit 38 home runs and posted an .857 OPS. He's also a right-handed hitter and plays center field, a position that the Phillies have struggled to solve for as much as the last 15 years. At the same time, Robert has hit .216 with a .649 OPS since the start of the 2024 season and has a lengthy injury history. Rosenthal mentioned the recent groin tightness, and 2023 is the only season that Robert played more than 100 games. He entered the league during the pandemic-shortened 2020 season. A year ago, when it appeared that it would take a haul to land Robert, there were many red flags for the Phillies and other teams. But Robert is essentially just a rental at this point. He has a $20 million club option in his contract for 2026 and 2027, but with the way that things are going now, whoever is employing him will just take the $2 million buyout and be done with the deal in the winter. So the White Sox aren't going to get a ton for Robert if they trade for him. And to finish his complete thought here, that he continues on to state, given the needs the Phillies have both in the outfield and in the middle of their lineup, there's definitely a case to be made for trading for Robert, if it doesn't require giving up a top 10 prospect. Is there a scenario where he's bad and or injured and you don't get much out of him? Yes. There's also the possibility that Robert, who will turn 28 during the first week of August, revives his career when he gets away from an incompetent organization like the White Sox. Maybe he plays his way back into the $20 million option next year being in consideration. Maybe not. But if he's just solid, that would give you an outfield upgrade over Max Kepler and allow you to move Brandon Marsh to left field, which is his better position. In this scenario, Justin Crawford could either finish the season at AAA Lehigh Valley or be a part of another trade. Robert could also just platoon with Marsh in left field while having Crawford play every day in center field, something Dombrowski said would need to happen if Crawford was promoted. It's a lot to think about, but the evaluation with Robert is a very different one than it was a year ago, and it seems that the Phillies recognize that. And that is the largest point I wanted to hit on here, is this feels like a Dave Dombrowski move. That for all the reputation of Big Bad Dave Dombrowski that's ready to wheel and deal, that's ready to cash in every prospect he has to upgrade this roster and give them the best chance at a World Series, that has not been the version of Dave Dombrowski that we've observed here in Philadelphia. This has been a president of baseball operations, a general manager that has been incredibly cautious with giving up any player of talent value and really has dug through the bargain bin of options that we've seen. The Carlos Esteveses, we've seen David Robertson for 3 times in a Phillies uniform for this point. We've seen Brandon Marsh be this potential platoon option that you hope can turn into more. And that's kind of what I'm sick of here. But what I can recognize with all that is he's going to be very calculated in his approach. And if Dave Dombrowski is sitting in his office right now, crunching the numbers and believing that the true version of Luis Robert Jr. is closer to that 2023 White Sox player who was one of the better players in all of Major League Baseball, and believes he can get him for pennies on the dollar, that does feel like the type of move that Big Dave wants to pull off. I'm not quite there with Luis Robert Jr., to be perfectly honest, that I've seen too many red flags. The lack of games, the injuries, and really how dreadful he's looked all season. Again, over a calendar year since we've really seen him play competent, high-level baseball. That's not something that I'm interested in this point in time. And while I agree with the general consensus that sometimes you put a guy in another location and things turn out differently, Philadelphia is not just any other place. It is going to be quite a drastic change from a mentality and pressure standpoint to be playing for the Chicago White Sox, one of the historically worst teams in how they performed last year, to playing for the Philadelphia Phillies, who are hoping to contend for a World Series this year. That's a lot to throw at a guy, and who knows if Luis Robert Jr. is truly built for this. Now, to that same point, and a fair pushback to that, is of course, who knows who any of these guys are. That in every situation is very different. Now, obviously, we have guys, and there will be options on the table of players who have more experience playing in high leverage situations than is the case in this specific extreme, but I'll tie this right back to O'Neal Cruz again. Has the Pittsburgh Pirates seasoned him and prepared him for high-level baseball in a way that can immediately translate in Philadelphia? You hope that is the case if you are trading for the guy, that in each of these cases, theoretically, it could work, but it is a risk, and that is a big risk at the Phillies. We have to find out whether or not they are willing to take. The more I sit back and digest it, the less I feel good about this being the option, but the more likely that I do think it is to happen here. That this feels like a Dave Dombrowski move where he believes he can get maximum potential, where he believes he's buying into a guy at his low point, and we will see whether or not the Phillies do reap the benefits of this. Do want to hear from you guys in the comments if you're in the same spot as me. I do feel like this is one of the more polarizing options that we have put on the table. There's some strong feelings on Luis Robert Jr. There are people that will ride for him, believe that he is that star player that he once flashed to be, a true 5-tool player in a way that the Phillies straight up do not have in their outfield options. They need to do something. They need to add a guy. There has to be a better outfield option than is currently on the roster, but I'm not certain that Luis Robert is quite that in the way that they need. But do want to hear from you guys in the comments as always. Let me know your thoughts. Is that the move in your mind? Is this the guy that could push them over the edge and put them in the driver's seat of a World Series run once again? We will see ultimately what happens. Let me know what you guys think below. As always, appreciate each and one of you guys for tuning in. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video here. I'll be back with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.